Welcome to Watch, Review, Repeat. This is the podcast where two best friends discuss the latest in film and television and then do it all over again the following week. My name is Colton Brown. Joining me is Andrew Meadows. Andrew, it's just going to be the two of us this time, but it's kind of just back to normalcy for us, right?
That's right. This week we got to watch Mindhunter, a Netflix original series all about serial killers. And it was pretty good. But we have some things to address before we get into that. We have a little bit of news for everybody this week, not a whole lot.
We do, and so we're starting with the topic that has gotten a lot of exposure this week, and of course what I'm talking about is the sexual harassment and assault allegations against Harvey Weinstein, famously the co-founder of the Weinstein Company and Miramax as well. And so the original source was the New Yorker. There was a piece written by Ronan Farrow, and basically it's the result of what he describes as a 10-month investigation, basically detailing the behavior and the transgressions committed by Harvey Weinstein over the course of basically a couple decades. He says that there was 13 women that came forward and revealed that Weinstein had sexually harassed them or sexually assaulted them in some manner. And to see something like this escalate into the story that we've seen, it's very disturbing to read about, to hear the accounts that are provided by some of these women that have come forward and kind of revealed this really dark undercurrent of Hollywood. And it's heartbreaking to read about a lot of this stuff. It really is. It's
just another example of a person in power abusing it, and some of the accounts that have come forward, they talk about how, you won't make it in Hollywood unless you do this, and he just completely abuses his position as an executive person, and it's absolutely terrible.
Mm-hmm. The original New Yorker article says that three of the women that were part of this investigation basically said that Weinstein had raped them. And it's unfathomable to think about someone that has been able to get away with this for so long.
For decades, yes.
Exactly. To me, that implies that there exists this very toxic culture within Hollywood. And I think it's always been there, and I think it still is there today. And I think we're just kind of seeing a glimpse of it in terms of these heinous acts that have been committed by Harvey Weinstein. And to be quite frank, that pisses me off. And I think it should piss everyone off, because something like this type of behavior, it has no place in not only Hollywood, but really in our society in general. So props to these women coming forward and speaking with the New Yorker and having the courage to speak up and say, hey, this is what happened to me. And clearly there's a pattern of behavior here that needs to be exposed. So in some ways, I hope that this does create change to the culture, but I think that's probably not going to happen immediately.
But the more it gets aired out, the more the harder it is to do it.
Right. I mean, and this is step one, I think, of probably many steps is making awareness of it. The public is now aware of this sort of behavior from someone like Weinstein, who is in a position of power. And, in the wake of basically this coming out, we've had a flux of celebrities and other people that have really kind of said, yeah, well, this has been happening all along. And we've got some huge names coming out and saying stuff. Ashley Judd, Angelina Jolie, Gwyneth Paltrow, Alyssa Milano came out and basically, she started this whole social media movement of, hey, if you've ever been sexually harassed or assaulted, write me too, as a reply to this tweet. And, I follow a lot of people on Twitter, and the amount of people that have said me too, shit, even on Facebook, people that I know that aren't even in the Hollywood business, just coming out and saying me too, it's like...
It's crazy, right? I've seen that in mine. I didn't know where it started from or what originated it.
Granted, we're two white men, so obviously we're kind of speaking from a position that I don't think is really too at liberty to kind of hammer on the harrowing nature, I think, of a lot of this.
But we agree it's terrible shit that shouldn't happen.
Right. For us, it's cut and dry. It shouldn't happen. It has no place in society, and I guess we hope that by at least bringing some awareness to it on our end, then maybe some people that haven't paid attention to something like this can really, understand and come to grips with and help out and raise awareness as well. So
Like I said, the conversation's being had, so that's where it begins, and then from there it begins. It's harder to have a decade-long abusive nature in such a position. You know what I mean? As long as people are having the conversation. So I think that's where it starts.
Yeah, hopefully. But I'm kind of getting away from that, kind of moving back more towards our kind of usual stuff.
That Black Panther trailer, man, got goosebumps the first time I watched it. I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, Ryan Coogler is the man. I talked about Creed last week, and he's such a talented director, and just looking at the visuals of this movie, oh man, I'm ridiculously excited for Black Panther. What?
All I can think about is that thing you sent me.
Oh, yeah. For our listeners, we frequent a forum called NeoGAF, and there was a poster. He posted a picture of, the post was basically white people after watching Black Panther, and he posted this picture of an older white gentleman wearing like traditional African garb.
It's hilarious.
I feel like that doesn't quite do it justice, but
we'll post it on the website. It's great.
we'll post it. Yeah, Andrew was talking to me before we started recording. He's like, I just read this YouTube comment on the Black Panther trailer that said, I just forgot that Thor Ragnarok even existed. But just the way that he was speaking about it, like it instantly reminded me, because I'd seen that post like a couple hours prior to even us having that conversation. I died laughing to look at the picture of it. But when Andrew started talking like that, I was like, oh fuck, that is so on point. I have to send him this. You were dying over there for a good minute just looking at that.
Oh yeah, it's pretty great. The use of the soundtrack through both trailers, really. I mean,
yeah, I feel like you can tell when the directors have a say in the marketing. I feel like Marvel's letting kind of the directors have a little bit more influence in terms of what their marketing materials entail.
Is that confirmed? Is it confirmed that the directors have more say in the marketing? Because you can definitely tell.
No, that's more or less speculation on my part. I think that's largely true. I know like James Gunn, did Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2. I think certainly in terms of Volume 2, it seemed like he had a lot more input, and I think I can't cite anything immediately off the top of my head, but he's very active on Facebook, and I think that he's kind of alluded to as much in terms of kind of what he wanted to reveal in the marketing material and what maybe he didn't want to reveal. I know Rian Johnson, obviously Lucasfilm might operate differently than what Marvel Studios does, but Rian Johnson was saying that even kind of before the first teaser trailer was released for Last Jedi, that they had a very deliberate timeline. This date will reveal this little bit of information. On this date, we'll reveal this little bit of information, and then we'll never reveal that bit of information because it's too spoilerish or something like that. I mean, I have to think that for someone like Marvel Studios, they're probably following a pretty similar MO to what Lucasfilm is doing, kind of with like The Last Jedi. So I mean, this trailer doesn't feel like a generic trailer,
No, it definitely doesn't. It feels like a production. It really does.
Like there's just a lot of little flourishes in terms of the editing and stuff like that. To me, that suggests that either they have the best marketing team, or I think that probably the powers that be are heavily consulting with the marketing team saying, hey, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. Because I think Marvel's kind of getting to the point where they're hiring directors. And it's not to disparage like kind of what came before it, but I think that a lot of the directors that they're having now, I think they're really kind of handing them a lot of creative reins to kind of do what they want. Like I said, Thor Ragnarok's a good example. I mean, Taika Waititi is an oddball choice for a comic book film of any nature, and to give him, Thor property and kind of basically let him run wild with it from what we can tell. I think you're seeing the same principle applied here. I mean, I think Ryan Coogler,
it's cool. Yes.
He doesn't have the same sort of style that certainly someone like Taika Waititi has, but he has his own distinct style, and I think that you're seeing that. You're obviously going to see it within the movie itself, but I think you're seeing that in this trailer, and I think you saw it in the first teaser trailer that we got as well. So when you let talented filmmakers kind of do their thing, it's cool to see marketing material that reflects that. I mean, so I'm confident in the final product that Black Panther is going to turn out pretty good. Like that confidence is largely inspired by the fact that both trailers we've got have been kind of works of art in their own right.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. That's why I was asking if it was confirmed, if they're influencing the marketing material, because it's definitely apparent that the trailers are, I mean, I don't know, you see a typical trailer and yeah, you get a hint of what the movie's about and okay, I'll go see it, but these trailers are actually something to grip a hold of, and they're very entertaining to watch. Especially, like I said, specifically the Black Panther stuff. It's been very gripping since the first one, and the second one really drove it home. It's really good.
I mean, we definitely got a lot more stuff that I wasn't expecting this time around. I mean, this trailer itself, actually, I guess I wasn't expecting either. I think it had been rated by like a Canadian board or something like that. So I think we kind of loosely knew it was coming at some point, but this kind of dropped without any real fanfare.
It was really good.
It was.
The first one had this, I don't know how to describe it, but there was a line tracing the text of the Black Panther, and it matched up perfectly with the beats. It was perfectly edited, and it was just, so good. And then we get this one, and this one had more visual, just footage from the movie. And there was a scene where the guy blows up the car, and Black Panther runs down the side of the wall and everything else. It looks so awesome. It looks very cool.
That was the one like bit of like visual moments where I'm like, oh my God, this is so good.
Yeah.
The part where Claw blows up the car, and yeah. I don't need to describe it again. You already described it, but but there's a lot of moments in it, like just Killmonger basically materializing his suit. Actually, T'Challa's materializing his own suit at one point too, and we kind of see, it's got like some purple glow to it. I assume there's some sort of vibranium effects going on there that are...
It's like they wear their suit, but it's hidden within a hologram or something, you know what I mean?
Well, I don't know exactly what they'll do. I mean, Wakanda, as it has been traditionally portrayed in both the comics, and I think we got hints of it in Civil War, they're this very technologically advanced, really far more technologically advanced than really any other country.
It looked like at one point that the whole area is covered within a cloak.
Right, yeah, there's some sort of barrier kind of obscuring the vision of it. So that's definitely one example of it, but I kind of get the impression that they might just have these suits kind of internally stored, and that's far-fetched obviously, but there's like Iron Man, even in the comics, had the bleeding edge armor where basically he stored the entire Iron Man suit within his skin and he could materialize it at will. I don't know if they're going to go quite that far with it, but it definitely appears that way.
Killmonger had like a bunch of like boils all over his skin. I don't know what the fuck that's all about, but he had some sort of, maybe he's got a skin condition, I don't know, but it might have something to do with that Panther suit he's got, which looks pretty cool. Looks like cool stuff, man. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, I'm pumped. And what really is crazy about it is we're in October. It comes out in February. The gap between Thor, which comes out in, I guess, less than a month at this point, and Black Panther is really nothing, which is pretty crazy to think about. Marvel's just pumping these things out. Even after Black Panther comes out, Avengers is a few months away. Ant-Man is a few months after that. There's no break for Marvel. These guys are always up to something.
Well, they have enough IP to do it, you know what I mean? There's no reason why they cannot continue to pump out movies. Well,
absolutely. But I think the exciting thing is that they've clearly perfected, I guess, the art of making these movies, and it's, it doesn't feel like...
It doesn't feel like Fox.
Or Sony.
Or Sony, yeah.
It doesn't feel like they're getting bogged down, they make one good one and they pump 3 shitty ones out. It's not. There's a very consistent quality to them. And I understand that some people might not like that because they do have, generally speaking, a very similar tone and feel to a lot of them. But it's definitely something that resonates with me. And if they can keep putting these things out at such a consistent quality, fuck, man, I'm it's awesome to see this shit coming out every 3 months. It's an embarrassment of riches is really what it is.
Yeah, they're similar movies, and I can understand people getting tired of them, but they're really well-made movies. You know what I mean? They're visually stunning. They typically have good soundtracks. They bring in creative directors to where you have a different feel to each and every movie. You know what I mean? They're very, to the average person, I suppose, yes, they're very similar in tone and everything else. They follow the same kind of arc, but they're very differently told stories to where every couple months or every 6 months or whatever, however the release schedule is, it feels very different and it feels good. And I don't know, I get something different every time I watch one of them. So I have no problem with them doing what they're doing. I actually very much support it because, like I said, the movies feel very different in their own right. Ant-Man's probably the biggest one that I think feels completely off the wall. Yeah, it's about a superhero. Yeah, it follows the same arc, but it's made in a way to where it feels totally different.
Well, if there was one franchise that I'd point to as what the fuck are they thinking that worked out way better than anyone probably really expected to. Guardians of the Galaxy's probably got to be poster child for that, right?
Yes. Oh man, probably one of my favorite Marvel movies is Guardians of the Galaxy. 1 and 2, they're just
both are excellent.
Yeah,
I agree. You're to say you're not going to find many arguments for me. I have my preferences of Marvel movies. I certainly think some are better than others. Some are mediocre, probably even possibly generous way to put it, but none of them are bad. None of them really kind of rub me the wrong way. Kind of like what you're saying with Fox, where, you've got your X-Men Origins Wolverine, you've got your X-Men The Last Stand, you've got your X-Men Apocalypse. Like, those movies are just complete garbage. So, speaking of old Fox, we got a trailer, I guess a teaser trailer for their newest attempt at adding another film to the X-Men universe in the form of the New Mutants. What did you think about this teaser trailer that just came out for that?
Well, I'll put it to you this way. I have a pretty screwed up iPhone, and I watched Black Panther on my iPhone initially, and I came back home and I watched it a second time on the computer, and then I watched it a third time on the computer, right? The New Mutants, I watched it the first time on my phone, and I haven't revisited it since. I'm not saying it's bad, but at the same time, I'm not entirely interested, to be completely honest with you. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Same thing as what I said with Apocalypse. I guess we'll see how it goes.
That's your default. I think this is going to be shit, but I don't want to outright call it a shit until I actually see it.
Yeah, that might be it. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but it looked like Arya Stark's in it. Is Arya Stark in it?
Arya Stark is in it. Yeah, Maisie Williams
there we go.
is.
Okay.
She's Wolfsbane.
She's Wolfbane?
Wolfsbane.
What is she all about?
She can turn into a wolf.
Huh. She's a werewolf.
More or less. But it's like her mutant power, so she's not like a proper werewolf, I guess. We just had that conversation with Black Panther about, it seems like certain directors are having a personal touch added to the marketing materials. I don't think that's the case here.
No.
This trailer itself feels very run of the mill, like for horror trailers. But what I find odd about it is that in spite of kind of the trailer being kind of generic, and I'd say nothing particularly noteworthy, I'm very intrigued by the concept of this movie, in the sense that this kind of seems like it's Fox letting a director play fast and loose with their properties, and usually when they've done that, that's when their films have worked out to be the best. Deadpool, Logan, probably the prime examples of that. So this is something that I think has a pretty low budget. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be rated R or not, so I don't know exactly how kind of far they're taking it in terms of the thematic content of it, but it's got a good cast. I mean, Anya Taylor-Joy is, I think, the lead. She's playing Magic.
What's her power?
I think she can teleport around, basically.
Okay. She was in Vivitch.
The Vivitch, yes. I mean, she's great in that. She was in Split, which I did not see, but I've heard is pretty good. And then, like you said, Maisie Williams, Arya Stark herself is in this. Charlie Heaton. Charlie Heaton was, I think, Jonathan Byers, Stranger Things. And so it's got a pretty good cast. I like the inherent concept of it. It means basically just a bunch of young mutants are kind of stuck in this secret facility. I assume just kind of being tested or tortured. I don't know exactly what's going on with them, but it seems like it could be set up for a pretty fun, interesting horror movie that kind of gives a different bent to the X-Men franchise than we've seen before. So from that perspective, I'm curious about this. I said the trailer itself, I don't think did a whole lot of favors for the movie.
The guy did direct. The director directed *Fault in Our Stars*, which was pretty good, right?
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah, I almost hate myself for making this comparison, but I don't know if you saw it, but the Josh Trank Fantastic Four reboot. There's a particular sequence in that movie where all the Fantastic Four are basically acquiring their powers, and it's like a very Cronenberg body horror type scenario, which it's a pretty cool sequence in its own right. It's just makes no fucking sense for the Fantastic Four.
He described it terribly. I mean, that sounds awful.
Well, that's just it. It's supposed to be awful. Like, it's like these kids are like in pain. Like it's like a horrible thing for them to endure, to like go through like getting these powers. And I'm like that's an interesting concept applied in a vacuum, but it's not an interesting concept when you apply it to the first family of comic books. Like, it's just like, what are you doing? Granted, that's Fox, so
we don't give a fuck.
But I think that something like that, something I think what Trank was trying to do with characters that had no business being involved in a scene like that, I think if they tried something like that here, it could be pretty interesting. Like I said, I mean, the sequence itself within that movie, and that's probably the only sequence within that movie that I could say anything even remotely nice about, because that is a garbage-ass movie. Like, I can bag on Origins Wolverine and Apocalypse as long as I want, but they don't hold a candle to the shittiness that is that Fantastic Four reboot, also known as Fant Four Stick.
Never seen it.
Don't do it. It's garbage. You say the director itself does not want you to see it, so that should be pretty telling. He got blacklisted from Hollywood for a few years because of that movie, so yeah, it's not good. But
I like the fact that they can bring these people to a horror film. Like, there's plenty of characters that could be applied to a horror movie. You know what I mean? That are comic book based. And we haven't got it yet. I mean, I guess we have got it with like maybe the old school Constantine or something like that, but I think it's interesting. I think it could be applied well. I really wouldn't, I'd prefer to see it from somebody else other than Fox, to be completely honest.
Yeah, and that's fair. Like I said, I mean, I guess my kind of argument in favor of this kind of being potentially good is the fact that it seems like maybe Fox is trying to be hands-off with it. He said when Fox is just kind of, hey, you got an idea, run wild with it. We're going to give you a pretty small budget, but, you can kind of do whatever the fuck you want. We're not going to, fiddle around with it. That's usually kind of when they've had their most success, I would argue. And so by that, by extension, I think that possibly this could turn out to be something that is kind of more of a surprise hit or surprisingly good movie, I guess, than anything else. But as you say, we'll see, right?
That's it. Speaking of other horror movies, though, did you see the new trailer for Stranger Things?
I did. Yeah, Stranger Things Season 2. We got our final trailer for that. It's actually coming out in, I think, just about a couple weeks from when we're recording now, which is pretty cool. So I was actually hesitant whether I wanted to watch this one, given that it's so close to release, but you had already said that you did, so I kind of felt compelled to, and we had a lack of television news to cover this week, so it seemed appropriate. I don't have much to say other than looks good,
Looks good. Yeah, excited for it.
I am too. I'm curious, are you planning on rewatching the first season at all prior to this coming out?
I don't think I will. To be completely honest, I probably won't. I got some other stuff I want to watch, so I probably won't revisit it, but I am very stoked for Season 2 of Stranger Things. I'm very stoked.
Yeah, like I said, it looks good. I don't want to get too hyper-analytical about it because it's so close to coming out, so... For those that cannot resist and can't help themselves, the trailer's out there, obviously.
That's that.
So, moving on to our main segment, our main topic for this week, we checked out a Netflix original series called Mindhunter. Now, I think that this is a show I'd say that probably has kind of flown under the radar, I would say, for...
That's fair.
At least it seems from my perspective. This is something that I'd heard about a couple months ago, and it seemed interesting to me, and it's a subject matter that I just find generally interesting anyway. This is coming to us. It's not coming to us from David Fincher per se. He's not the creator of this show. Actually, he's an executive producer of it
and director.
He did, yeah, correct. But it was his name, I guess, that really kind of got me interested in the first place. This is someone who's probably one of my favorite directors, period, if not my favorite director ever. He's most notably worked on, say, probably Zodiac, Seven, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The American One, The Social Network,
Fight Club,
Gone Girl. Again, just a staggeringly impressive resume. Even his, I guess, in some ways misses, like Alien 3, I think, was his first directorial credit. I mean, that the production of that was such a shit show that it's almost awe-inspiring, the fact that movie turned out to be anything even close to watchable, especially when you consider the fact that its successor is actually worse than it somehow. I guess really, actually, all of its Alien successors have been worse than it, now that I think about it. Shit. Wow, Alien 3 is the third best Alien movie. That blows my mind. Yeah, David Fincher, just such a talent. And to have his name attached to something like this is definitely what drew my interest. Because I know that Fincher has worked on basically the subject matter here in the past. So clearly it's something that resonates with him, and it's something that resonates with me. And he's a director that clearly treats the subject with reverence and understanding. And so I kind of felt like this show was primed to be something pretty good.
To be clear, what is the show about?
Right. So this is a bit of a period piece. It takes place in 1977, and we're following the Federal Bureau of Investigation, basically in the early days as they try to kind of unravel what drives violent criminals to commit the acts that they do. So we center on a couple of FBI agents, Holden Ford and Bill Tench, who really kind of pioneer, I guess, the method to really understand the psyche and the motivations for a lot of serial killers that had been imprisoned. And
to be clear, it's something that the FBI doesn't necessarily want to investigate these things.
Right, so they're basically kind of doing this within the constraints of the FBI and against a lot of the pushback that the current thinking of the time has against doing something like this. And they're also helped by a psychologist as well, portrayed by Anna Torv. I think probably most notably of Fringe. I don't know if you watched that show back in the day.
I did. I saw a couple of episodes, yeah.
Yeah, I think I watched the first season. I enjoyed it. And I know a lot of people online that I've read really, really enjoy it. So that's always been kind of one that's been on my backlog, my very extensive backlog of TV shows to watch. But yeah, I mean, it's a concept for the show that I find actually really, really engaging personally. So that's partly why I was drawn to it. But I gotta say, I was really impressed. I came away really impressed with this show.
I know the first couple of episodes I struggled with. The first episode, let me reframe that. I struggled with the first episode. And then I forced myself to rewatch the first episode because I fell asleep in it. And then I rewatched the first episode, and then I watched the second one immediately after. And then by the second episode, I was immediately hooked. And I grinded out the rest of the episodes. It's a really well-made show. I think it's really good. One episode in particular hit me in the feels pretty hard. Actually made me tear up a little bit, and which I don't know if that's particularly hard to do. I'm pretty empathetic. I don't know. I easily relate to things.
So you don't exhibit traits of typical serial killers. That's good to know.
That's right, but the show is just really well made. In particular, I noticed the soundtrack. I think the soundtrack, especially at the end of every episode, I think that was a trait among every episode and every director. They implemented the soundtrack in a very creative way. Did you notice that?
I did. Well, I kind of, every time it would kick in, I would be like, oh, I guess it's the end of the episode's coming up. I'm waiting for something good to happen.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was really tasteful. You know what I mean? I thought it was cool. And the cinematography I thought the cinematography was great too. It was just very, not one episode in particular, but it was just tasteful.
It was. It's got a very unique look, I think, that it brings to the table. So I was kind of reading about this because I was kind of struck by the look, and I think this is something, before I even started watching it, you'd kind of mentioned that, we mentioned it was a period piece, but there was something visually that you said was kind of throwing you off a little bit. Is that, you kind of know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I watched the first episode, and then I fell asleep, and then I talked to you the following day, and I gave you my brief, what I got from what little bit I watched, and what I gathered was it's a period piece, but something about it, like you said, felt completely off. It didn't strike me as a period piece, even though I knew that it was, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and I still don't know why I thought that. Do you know why I would think that?
Well, I was just going to speculate on that. So I guess, as I said, I was researching this, and I guess Fincher and for the crew, they basically utilized a new red camera for the production of this. So it's shot digitally. So I think it has a very kind of clean look to it. I wonder, I think kind of our mental image of anything shot in the 70s is kind of a little bit more of a grungier picture, just kind of based on the cameras that were used at the time. And I think when we try to capture perhaps a time period that isn't totally reflective of the cameras and the cinematography that was used at that time, it's almost jarring in a way.
Yeah,
because it's got the modern. I mean, it's got a very digital look to it.
It's just clean.
Where it's a lot cleaner, I think, than our brain kind of expects it to be based on what we have processed similar images to be in the past. So I think that was kind of my speculation. So I don't know if that's why. I mean, I thought it was a beautifully shot show, very very stylishly crafted. I think it did a good job of establishing the kind of the period nature of it, in terms of costume design and the cars and the settings and everything like that. It all felt very period appropriate, and it's a very talky show. I guess it's not exactly a action packed television show. It's very much
no. The most compelling portions of the show are the so the way that let me preface this with the way the show is drawn out. So you have these FBI agents that go around and educate local law enforcement on things that the FBI is doing to be more productive, right? And as they travel around the United States educating law enforcement, they interview serial killers, which at the time they weren't necessarily labeled as serial killers. They were labeled as people that murdered more than one person, right? And so as they travel around the United States and they interview these serial killers, they start to categorize them and put them within a
spectrum, I guess.
A spectrum. Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. So they put them within a spectrum and they start to categorize the way these people act and the way they murder people, and they start to classify them, right? And then as they travel around the United States, they might pick up a case here and there to where they can actually implement the things that they have learned by interviewing these serial killers. And I don't know, it makes for a really good television show.
It is. And I mean, I've mentioned in the past that Mad Men is my favorite show of all time, and I think that they have quite a bit in common, not in terms of kind of the plot, obviously, but just in terms of the way that they're both period pieces that are much more concerned with characterizations and really just dialogues that really kind of bring a lot of interesting ideas to the forefront.
That makes me very intrigued to catch up on Mad Men. I've never seen one episode of Mad Men.
Well, I think it's one of those things that I guess it's probably no coincidence that I would enjoy something like this as a result, but I heartily recommend Mad Men to anyone. I understand that it's perhaps not to everyone's taste, but you're wrong, and that's fine. It's okay to be wrong sometimes. It really is. I understand why people wouldn't think it'd be their favorite show. Like I said, I think it's just something that very specifically fits into my wheelhouse personally. But I think even if it wasn't something that you particularly cared for, you could still acknowledge its accomplishments. I think is probably kind of where I would sit with people in Mad Men. But
well, it's interesting because this show brought a lot of modern things to the forefront in the period that it represented. And it makes you think about a lot of things. One thing that I actually thought about was that you have notable serial killers that are listed within this show. And I couldn't help but think, listen, you don't really hear about serial killers nowadays. I mean, before I guess people read about it in the paper and this, that, and the other about how people are randomly ending up dead and they're calling them the Zodiac Killer or whatever, right? Nowadays you hear about people getting shot up. This guy shot 400 people at this concert, right? You don't hear about these things anymore and how these things change. And I thought that was super interesting. Do you think about that while you watch this type of stuff? Like, you don't hear about serial killers anymore. All you hear about is this guy shot these many people and this is what he did. This is the damage that he did. And then we caught him. Now, do you contribute that to that our law enforcement can catch people after the crime more efficiently? Or do you contribute that to that people are changing and they can exhibit more damage more quickly because of the technology that's available to them?
I don't know. I mean, that is a good point. I mean, I was trying to think in recent memory if there's any really kind of been any cases of serial killers that stick out in my mind, and I guess the answer is no, which isn't to say I don't think that there haven't been serial killers recently. I guess it's just the landscape is...
Do they keep it hush-hush?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think it's just for something that was considered so scandalous back in the day, now it's like you said, we're looking at, one deranged individual shoots up an entire concert.
I would argue that modern technology allows law enforcement to capture people more quickly before they can draw something out.
That's possible. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of what the characters in this show are trying to do, right?
Exactly.
Is to develop this methodology that can allow them to either predict behavior or at least find individuals that would fit patterns and of behavior that would at least allow them to correlate them with cases of serial killings. So I'm not sure. I mean, that's a good question. It really is. I mean, that's something that I'd have to do a lot more research on to think about and see if...
But it was almost the point that Holden was arguing throughout the series of the show. He had to consistently argue his point on why his investigation and why the study is so important. And that's because people in that period were, hey, listen, people just flip a switch and people are just born evil. I mean, that's not accurate. People commit crimes based on the society that they're brought up in. That was one argument that I caught I would say within the first third of the show. And they had the argument based on the intellectuals in the show, the people that studied that stuff. So it was girlfriend and the person that they bring in as the advisor. And I don't know. I found it super interesting to think about, because now we have domestic terrorists as our major thing that we constantly think about. You had the guy that shot up Las Vegas. You have the kid that shot up the elementary school and everything else. You have these terrible people that do these horrendous crimes, but how do they compare to the crimes that were committed in the 60s and the 70s? You know what I mean? And it's interesting to think about. Do they commit these crimes because technology is available to them and they can extrude the force that they extrude because the technology is available, or would they have been serial killers in the times of the 60s?
Yeah, I don't think any of us can definitively answer that, certainly not right now.
Those are things that I was thinking about when I was watching the show anyways.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, to kind of bring it back to the show, I mean, I think that's probably a positive reflection on the show, is that it does really kind of prompt a lot of these conversations and interesting kind of thoughts on it. And I mean, I think that's really largely what the show is concerned with is, hey, let's stop and have a conversation about why these individuals committed the acts that they did. And it's not trying to glorify them in any way. It's just pointing out, like, instead of just condemning them outright and saying that what they did was bad and just, let's lock them up and throw away the key. There's elements of that, obviously. Let's probe their minds so that we can prevent this in the future and, as you said, actively apply it to things that are happening now so that maybe we don't have to have this conversation in 50 years because it's just not applicable. And I guess maybe that's kind of what you're alluding to in the sense that, well, is it still applicable? I'd say it probably is to an extent, but maybe it is lesser than it was back in the day.
Well, I would say that it's just changed. The execution of these crimes have changed from one thing to another. You know what I mean? Where people would have to go subliminal and execute the crimes that they're trying to commit to now where they can just kind of execute them in one big thing and get it all done. You know what I mean? And they get caught or they kill themselves or what have you.
Well, it could also just be a case that those individuals are motivated for different reasons. I think that perhaps the psychology and the methodology behind serial killings is perhaps different than it is for your spree killers that you see a lot of media coverage on now, and maybe there's a conversation that needs to be had about, well, why are these people doing what they do? Are they motivated by different means than what we kind of understand about serial killers? I don't know. I'm not in any sort of position to offer any sort of insightful commentary on that.
No, but that's the whole discussion.
right, there very well may be insightful commentary that already exists about that we just haven't been privy to. But if nothing else, this show was kind of pointing us down a road where we say, hey, maybe we should look into this a little bit more. And so I think that's kind of a cool thing for this show to kind of inspire certainly conversations along those lines and interest into these ideas. And I think that reflects really well on the show, because I think that's kind of what it's trying to achieve more than it is, anything else. And obviously it's telling you, a snippet of history. There's a lot of proper actual history intertwined with some fiction in this, but I think, just kind of, again, to kind of bring it back to the show overall, I think that it does a really good job of intertwining that history with, the fiction of these characters. And I think these characters are done really well. Cast in general, I will say I really didn't recognize most of the cast for this show. I don't know if you did. Anna Torv is probably the only character in the main cast that I had any sort of passing familiarity with.
No, I didn't know any of them, to be completely honest with you. I actually really enjoyed Holt McCallney.
Yeah, I agree. He was definitely someone for me that stuck out as, like, I really enjoyed his presence on the screen. He's kind of, I guess, this veteran presence, I guess, certainly in terms of the team that we kind of follow throughout the show.
And he's the one that hit me in the feels. He hit me in the feels hard. That guy did.
He just had a very easygoing presence to him. Like, I 100% bought into his character. I'd say the Holden character we kind of get a little bit more depth on, because he's kind of, I guess, the focal point. And he's a good character, but someone like Bill and like the guy that plays him, like just there's something about that's just really compelling to watch. Something about him that's really compelling to watch, So it really is a good show. I said I came away pretty impressed with it. Do you want to get into spoilers on this?
Yeah, we can get into spoilers on this.
Let me do my patented spoiler warning. Full spoilers for Netflix's Mindhunter. So I think kind of the first thing that I really wanted to touch on when we got to our spoiler section for Mindhunter is, when we kind of mentioned that they were interviewing serial killers to really kind of probe insights for future cases, for profiles and stuff like that. And these are probably some of the most magnetic, really compelling sequences, I think, in the entire show, is when they do get a chance to sit down with some of these serial killers. And what's interesting, I think, about this is that, this show is based off of a book written by an actual FBI agent who did do basically what the show really kind of visualizes for us, and that he did sit down with a lot of these really prolific serial killers to try to get an understanding of what, where they were mentally when they committed these crimes, and to see if they really kind of could grapple with, I guess, their situations. And so, we get a lot of actual serial killers depicted in this show. Obviously, fictionalized, they're played by actors, but what these actors bring to the table is based off of interviews, dialogues, anything kind of basically involving these actual killers. So it's extremely chilling watching a lot of these things. I guess I can distance myself and think that, okay, well, it's just a show, but in a lot of cases, you're looking at one-to-one dialogue from actual conversations that had been had with these people, and you're talking about crimes that, again, did actually happen. So, in particular, Cameron Britton is the actor that plays Edmund Kemper. He's kind of the first real serial killer that Holden and Bill really sit down with, and just right off the bat, this guy
nails it. He's so good.
Oh my God! Like that seems like such a tough part to play, but there's just something off about him. You can tell something's immediately off about him, but he's playing basically a serial killer that was highly intelligent and was very open about his crimes that he committed. He didn't really seem remorseful about it. He was just very, this is what I did, and this is kind of what I was feeling at the time, and that's what motivated me to do that. So certainly at the time, that was something that was very off-putting and interesting, and kind of what I guess really inspired the whole chain of behavioral studies and everything else that they conducted from that point on. But just listening to the actor here and the way he talks, he's portraying a guy that was 6'9" in real life, so he had such a very intimidating physical presence as well. but just juxtaposed with his kind of soft-spoken nature and the very nonchalant way that he talks about killing people. And, it's really disturbing, but it's very fascinating from both, the standpoint of just someone watching the show and absorbing kind of the reality of it as it applied to the actual society, but also just in terms of watching a guy give a performance. Like,
it was chilling.
I've never seen this guy. I've never heard of this guy, but it's mind-blowing how good he was in this role. And I actually went back and watched a couple interviews that they did with, the real Ed Kemper. And, this guy got the mannerisms and the speech patterns just down so perfectly. Like, it's the reason it's so chilling is because it's so true to life. You're talking about a guy that I don't need to elaborate on his crimes. Just Google Ed Kemper if you're feeling adventurous, I guess, if you want to put it that way, as far as kind of the things that this guy did. And
I always think it enhances the experience when somebody embodies a character that you've never seen them embody a character before. You know what I mean? So they're strange to you. The actor's strange to you, and then if you don't know the serial killer or the character that they're trying to embody in any way whatsoever, it enhances the experience that much more. You know what I mean? Because they are that character, they are that person. And I don't know very much about Ed Kemper. I've never heard of him. I looked him up. I actually looked up a lot of the people that were interviewed after the fact, and like I said, that guy nailed it, man. He plays a very important role throughout the entire movie, though, or through the entire show. He's kind of that, the person that kicked off everything.
He's the Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, and I don't know, man. It's really good. It's really good stuff. I don't know how to say it other than that. The acting is fantastic. One thing that I brought up to you prior to the podcast was the way that the soundtrack was implemented. They used it in a way to where it was pretty cool. You know what I mean? To where it was noteworthy, anyways. Now, who was your? I don't know. I feel weird saying this, but who was your favorite serial killer? Who did you feel contributed the most to the show?
Yeah, that is a bit of an awkward conversation to have. Honestly, Ed Kemper, I think maybe just because he was the first one, but he had such a presence to him that I think that really impacted kind of my viewing of the show in the sense that, like, he really left an impression with me.
He did. Yeah, no, that's fair.
I think it's interesting that they intertwine this so well with a lot of these historical figures. We get Jerry Brudos, who was another serial killer. I think he's someone that I have heard about, and I have a degree in criminology, not to toot my own horn. It's a very useless degree, so I'm not doing that in the slightest. But some of the things that they did talk about within the show are things that I'm like, oh, I remember like reading about that guy in college.
Did you really?
Yeah, well, he's noteworthy because, the fetish thing kind of makes him stick out, I guess, because people point to that as an example of his deviance.
He's not the put the lotion on the skin guy, though, right? He's not Buffalo Bill, is he?
He's not Buffalo Bill, but I think he might have in some ways inspired Buffalo Bill, as seen in Silence of the Lambs.
Like, Buffalo Bill's a real person, though, right?
No, he's not a real serial killer. He was, okay, I just Googled it just to clarify. He was based on various elements of different serial killers, one of which is Jerry Brudos, and actually another one is Edmund Kemper.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, Kemper is probably, if you want to put it that way, and again, I feel it's a little cringy to kind of put it this way, but I guess he was my favorite. I think he was just the most compelling in terms of what he brought to the table.
That definitely sounds better, doesn't it?
Yeah. What about you? Who's your favorite? Tell me who your favorite was, and you have to phrase it exactly like that because I just did it for myself.
I don't know. I would say probably Ed Kemper. I mean, that's fair. He's definitely the most captivating. I did enjoy that guy at the end though. The one that got him in all the trouble. I can't remember his name.
Oh, Speck, Richard Speck.
Yeah, I thought he was pretty. I thought he was pretty cool.
They all had very different personalities, and I think that's what's so fascinating. Is because
it was almost the point, though. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, they're trying to slim it down to here's an organized versus a disorganized killer, and patterns of behavior or something along those lines to kind of categorize them, and so they can But, even within those categorizations, they're kind of all over the place in terms of their personalities and obviously kind of their crimes, the motivations, how they committed them, anything like that. It's all very much all over the place. So
it's remarkable how, like, for example, I got into a conversation and I was talking about the show, and people say that, like, a lot of serial killers have problems with their mothers. And it's interesting to think about that the study that the FBI conducted, which is portrayed by the show, lent us that information. Like, you can look at the like, one common trait is that people abuse animals. When people abuse these animals, they tend to be very troubled people. You know what I mean? And it all starts with pets and this, that, and the other. And that's all contributed to the study based within the show. And I think that's very, I don't know, I thought the whole show was super interesting in that regard. Now, what did you gather from the, there was a whole plot there where the last third of the show, I think, was about the principal who was essentially paying children to touch their feet and tickle them and this, that, and the other. What did you think about that?
Well, I put it in my notes here just because I think this is probably one of the few points in the show, and I don't know if this is based on any sort of actual real life case that the FBI agent that wrote the book that the show is based on. I don't know that off the top of my head, but it's kind of one of the few things in the show I think that offers maybe less of a black and white perspective on it. I mean, I could tell you where I fall on it, but it just in terms of kind of the way that it's shown, the way that certainly Holden kind of handles the situation. I think there's kind of a lot of ambiguity, and then it kind of shows the fallout of his decision to, pursue it the way that he does. And so I just kind of put it there just to kind of see if this was something. I kind of wanted to figure out what your perspective was on it.
I thought that it was interesting because throughout the entire show, Holden was portrayed as the character that was immune to the things that he surrounded himself with, right? Mm-hmm. Where his partner, there was one episode in particular, I think it was probably episode 7 or 8, I can't remember, but one episode in particular where he goes home to his wife and he finds out that his adopted child has seen a photo, and you can see that his partner is struggling with the things that he's the things that he's exposing himself to, that these serial killers are doing and this, that, and the other. He's very much struggling with his personal life because he's exposing himself to these crazy people, right? And then Holden's almost portrayed as the Rock. You know what I mean? He doesn't waver. He's fine with it all. Up until he gets introduced to this principal who is tickling these kids' feet, and it's almost, a lot of people say, hey, listen, he's a normal guy, everything's okay, and then but there's an element to it that's just not right, and he pursues it because he thinks it's right, and he condemns it and this, that, and the other, and there's some fallout to it. And it makes you question, was he right? Because I think I would definitely have a problem with it, and I think that's probably pretty fucking wrong what the principal was doing. But it's brought up to the fact that, listen, you're doing these things, and it's skewing your view, your point of view on things. It's making you paranoid, where you think that everybody has an angle and everybody's fucking wrong. And it kind of makes you think to where Holden is maybe not the Rock, and maybe he's egocentric, and he's paranoid, and this, that, and the other. You know what I mean? So it kind of breaks down the point of view character almost, and
yeah, actually, I mean, you brought a lot of points up that I didn't quite, I guess, kind of put together. I mean, yeah, it is interesting to see how Holden responds to something like this. Compared to certainly the depraved acts that he's been hearing about and having conversations about with these killers, and this is a guy that's, I mean, for me, there's no doubt about it, is doing something very creepy, tickling children's feet and giving them a nickel. Like, it's not a crime. Yeah, they point out in the show, like, well, it's not a crime to do that. I'm like, no, but it's pretty fucking inappropriate. But it is interesting that Holden, like you said, he's in this mindset, and then he kind of goes out of his way to kind of say, fuck this guy, for doing something that is considered deviant. And yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think Holden's in the wrong with what he did, but it certainly wasn't within the FBI's purview to do anything with that. And as the wise Captain America says, thought the punishment usually came after the crime. The whole point of the show is they're trying to pinpoint, can we predict these behaviors before they happen? So in some ways, Holden's justifying it by saying that, well, there's probably a little bit something more sinister going on in the principal's head. If I intervene now, then perhaps I can prevent that sinister thing from ever taking place if it hasn't already taken place.
Right, and then the wife comes in, and it almost brings those similar tropes that are apparent in other mediums, like almost like the Philip K. Dick, what the fuck's that show or that movie, where they predict the crimes before they happen with Tom Cruise. What's that movie?
Oh, Minority Report.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, he hasn't committed anything wrong. He hasn't broken the law in any sort of way. Yeah, he's doing things that are questionable, that is maybe wrong, but he's not a serial killer.
Well, he hasn't committed any crime, technically speaking.
Correct.
That they're aware of, obviously.
Right, so then it begs a moral question, and it brings in, I don't know. There's a lot of interesting questions that are asked throughout the show, which makes the show that much more compelling because it makes you think.
I agree.
Yeah, it's cool stuff, man. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I agree. So this has actually already been renewed for season 2, which I think is good news. I'm definitely well on board for that. I'll definitely be checking it out whenever that comes out.
Oh, yeah.
Got a ways to wait. This obviously just came out, but I'm excited about that. It sounds like Fincher's still going to be pretty involved in it. He directed 4 out of 10 episodes for this one, so I don't know that he has the time for it, but I'd almost enjoy seeing Fincher kind of pull a Cary Fukunaga on this and direct the whole thing.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
I feel like that would be pretty incredible to see, but he's a busy man. He's got shit to do, so I'm not sure that that's feasible, but for him to do 4 episodes on this show, I think was pretty spectacular in its own right, and it's really cool. It's a good show. It really is a good show. Again, it is a very talkative show. I guess perhaps that might not be to everyone's taste, but it's definitely something that I was already interested in, and it really just kind of delivered for me in terms of what I hoped it might be. It's less about, we have a lot of crime shows on TV, obviously. We have a lot of procedurals. You've got your CSIs, your Law and Orders, and all that. But this is kind of a very different type of show, I think, where those are very concerned about, here's our big case for the episode, for the show, however they're structured. They're very much about that. And this is less about that and more just of a behind-the-scenes glance at that's already happened. There are parts of this show where they're like trying to solve cases, yes, but it's not the focal point of the show. And the focal point is really just general characterization, both of its protagonist, Ford, and also in terms of just understanding the psyche and the mind of the killers that it explores.
And how does it impact the people that are investigating them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I thought that was the most impactful, especially that episode 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever it was. You know which one I'm talking about, right? Where he goes home to his wife?
Yeah.
Oh man, that hit me in the feels. I had some tears that I was pushing back, dude. It was so good. Something about the cop that breaks down because of the shit that he's experiencing is super powerful. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, and I think kind of what I was talking about with Ed Kemper and the way that he's portrayed, I think that what makes this show particularly impactful is that, it blurs, I think, kind of the line between the fact and fiction that it depicts, but it does it very seamlessly. So even something like, that, like you said, that cop that's just kind of struggling to come to grips with this very violent crime that's been committed, like it feels very real because it's just kind of mixed in with stuff that is 100% real.
Right.
I don't know if that particular case I don't know if that one's real or not. I think I read that the case with the majorette, I think the second to last episode, maybe the last episode as well, that was real from what I read.
Okay.
So, like I said, for me, like they all feel very true to life, and it doesn't, I think a lot of times with these crime shows, you kind of gets a little over the top territory, and this never does. I guess kind of really True Detective season 1, it's kind of the same way. Like,
oh yeah,
again, the different, I guess, kind of things that they're striving for, but in terms of kind of the impact, in terms of the production values and everything, like that's probably kind of a pretty easy comparison to make. And again, I don't know that I would say one is better than the other, because I think they're trying to do different things, but
they're similar.
They are similar, and they're both similar in the respect that they're both damn good. So that's my overall impression on it. Is it's pretty damn good. I would definitely recommend anyone check this out on Netflix. 10 episodes. They're around 50 plus minutes each. I think a couple are a little shorter than that. A couple are a little longer, but it's pretty well paced, I'd say, overall. We had to kind of binge watch it to kind of get, everything watched in time to record this and put it out within a decent time frame. But even if you just took this kind of an episode at a time, I think this would be a very, very compelling show.
At least give it 2 episodes to set the tone.
And I do agree. I meant to kind of piggyback off what you said earlier. It did take me about probably 30 minutes of the first episode to kind of come to I guess, to really kind of, for it to click, I guess.
You have to get involved in the characters in order for it to work.
And I guess that's true of every show, is that you really need to kind of, got to give it a little time for it to settle in. But this one I found more than most. It took just a little bit more time, I think, than I usually find for it to kind of really fall into place for me. But once it did fall into place, it's
easy to binge.
Yeah. So definitely highly recommended on my part. I assume you kind of would agree with that.
Oh yeah, no, without a doubt, it's an excellent made show. It's very well made, and I would highly recommend it, especially for the season. Almost, you know what I mean? It's a good season to kind of think about these things, I guess. It's Halloween, and if you're not out for a straight out horror movie, this is some very grounded stuff to dive into if it sets your mood for the season. Almost, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, well. That is Mindhunter, Netflix original series. Check it out. Andrew, what you been up to this past week?
What have I been up to? I haven't been up to a whole lot, to be honest with you. I did.
You've been a lazy fuck?
Yeah, I think I have been. I can't really think of anything. I don't know what I've been doing.
All right, you've been going to work and then going home and sleeping. Well, to be fair, you've been watching this show, which is, I don't want to give you too much shit, because I really have not done much myself, because we've been watching this show. I think I mentioned last week that all the CW stuff is coming back on, and I fully intended to watch all of the premieres, but I didn't get around to it for one reason or another. But for me, I guess the only thing that I did do, and this is covering very similar waters as what we did last week, I saw Blade Runner 2049 again, with the extra caveat that I saw it in IMAX this time around, and holy shit.
Yeah, it's totally awesome, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to see it again anyway, and then kind of the time that I saw it was pretty much going to be the only opportunity I would get to see it in IMAX before it departed, to make way for Geostorm.
Oh, that feels fucking wrong, dude.
It's like a punch in the stomach, isn't it?
Why would you do that?
Yeah, so I think the thing that caught me most immediately with it is that it is specially formatted for IMAX screens, and I did not realize that walking in. A lot of the IMAX movies are either, I guess just most of them will kind of shift aspect ratios between what is filmed with an IMAX camera and what isn't, and you can very obviously tell the difference in terms of not just the aspect ratio, but just in terms of the quality of the shot, in terms of the resolution of the shot. Whereas this one was, from frame 1 to the last frame, it was 100% in the full IMAX aspect ratio, full IMAX resolution, and it's already a technical masterpiece already. And when you just add in that IMAX sight and sound, like, holy shit!
The sound was amazing, wasn't it?
Everything about it was just blew my mind. Like, it makes me sad in some ways, because IMAX is it's the perfect viewing experience, and it's so hard to replicate that. Like, when Blade Runner comes out on Blu-ray, I'll pick it up, and I'll rewatch it, and I'll love it as much as I loved it now. But you're never going to duplicate that viewing experience in a home environment, and I wish that you could. And there's obviously no feasible way to do it unless you live in an IMAX which would be fine. I mean, I would do that 100%. No issues with that, but it's impractical, I suppose. But yeah, that was just, it's so good. Except I don't need to cover really much more than what we covered last week, because I think we did a pretty extensive rundown on it. I will stand by my thoughts last week, and that the ending for me was probably the most profound part of the movie overall. I don't need to get into spoilers with it here, in case people haven't watched it, but fuck, man, right in the feels again. But other than that, I really haven't been up to anything myself. I've kind of been getting back from vacation, getting back into the swing of things, back to work, and between Blade Runner and watching Mindhunter, I really haven't had as much time as I would have liked for watching some of the other stuff that I'm trying to catch up on. So hopefully I'll have a little bit more time this week to do that, and then I'll get a chance to talk about that next week. But that's more or less it for me. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in to yet another episode of Watch, Review, Repeat. All support is greatly appreciated. If you want to leave us a review, iTunes, Google Play, however you listen to us, that would be awesome. If you want to send us any feedback, check us out at, send it to watchreviewrepeat@gmail.com. Anything, really could be anything. And our intro and outro track is Mechanolith by Kevin MacLeod. That's licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. And for all other Watch, Review, Repeat needs, check us out at our website, watchreviewrepeat.com. Got everything you're going to need there. And that's pretty much it for this week. Next week, we are not 100% settled on a topic again. We've got a few options that we're toying around with, but we'll have an episode nonetheless, and we hope that you look forward to enjoying it as much as we look forward to reviewing whatever it is that we end up reviewing. So that'll do it for me, Andrew.
That's it for me. Have a good night.